Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here. Look, today we are going to untangle a topic that often feels, well, incredibly complex, but it is absolutely crucial for anyone who's worked hard to build a financial foundation. We are talking about trusts. We're going to demystify how trusts actually work to secure and protect your lifelong achievements, and we're going to do it by cutting straight through all that heavy legal jargon. We're going to look directly at the real nuts and bolts that make trusts such a massive powerhouse for wealth preservation. It all really starts with this one fundamental question. You built your wealth, but can you actually protect it? You see, accumulating assets, that's just half the battle. The other, arguably much more important half, is what happens to all those assets when you're no longer around to manage them, or, if unexpected outside threats suddenly pop up. It's the exact question that keeps a lot of successful people up at night. But as we'll see, there are highly structured ways to make absolutely sure your hard work isn't undone. Okay, let's just dive straight into the agenda for today. First, securing your financial legacy. Then, protecting wealth from mismanagement. Why trusts are a smarter alternative to wills, privacy, taxes, and reporting. And finally, shielding your assets from claims.
Starting right off with Section 1, securing your financial legacy.
So this first pillar is all about looking to the future. It's about ensuring that the value you've earned truly endures for the generations coming after you. But how does this actually work in practice? Well, it essentially comes down to locking up capital and empowering a trustee. When someone, they're known as a settlor, creates a trust, they place their capital into it. But they don't just hand it over blindly. They specify exactly which family members or individuals should benefit from the income and the capital down the road. And, even more importantly, they can dictate the exact proportions of those benefits. By handing over that discretion to a trusted third party, the trustee, you're creating this living, breathing mechanism that's designed to execute your exact wishes long into the future.
All right, moving on to Section 2, protecting wealth from mismanagement.
Look, wealth doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It exists within the incredibly complex ecosystem of a family. And this brings us to the deeply human side of estate planning. A trust lets a trustee exercise discretion based on real, nuanced human needs. For example, it guarantees young children are provided for when it comes to maintenance and education. But, and this is a big one, it also protects wealth from being completely frittered away by extravagant or profligate heirs. Imagine just handing a massive lump sum outright to someone who's terrible with money. A trust acts as a safety net. It protects naive family members who might get taken advantage of and ensures reliable, ongoing care for relatives with special needs. You can even use it to discreetly handle confidential family matters, support loyal retired employees, or facilitate your charity work. It's not just about the money. It's literally about protecting the people you care about from themselves and from others.
Which brings us to Section 3, a smarter alternative to wills. So why might a trust actually be a smarter alternative? Well, it largely comes down to avoiding a dreaded concept, probate. Administering an estate through probate when someone passes away can be a completely troublesome, bureaucratic nightmare. Think of the absolute slowest line at the DMV, multiply that by 1,000, and then drop a mountain of legal paperwork on top of it. It can take years, and critically, it can cause immediate painful cash flow issues for surviving dependents exactly when they need funds the most, essentially freezing assets in place while the red tape gets sorted out. If we put these side by side, you can really see the difference. With a traditional will and probate, the assets are effectively trapped inside the deceased estate. They're bound by these rigid formalities, which means hugely delayed distribution. But on the flip side, look at an active or standby trust. Because the assets owned by a trust are legally completely outside the estate of the deceased, they are available for distribution immediately upon death. No rigid probate, no frozen funds, no waiting around for years. The trust is already holding the assets, totally ready to act on your instructions. The absolute game changer here is flexibility, and that is perfectly captured by what's called a letter of wishes. If you want to change a traditional will, you have to rewrite the whole thing, or draft formal codicils, and both of those are time-consuming and incredibly rigid. A discretionary trust, on the other hand, just needs a fresh letter of wishes. This is literally just a document signed by the settlor to guide the trustee on how to run the trust fund. It requires 0 witnesses, so as your life circumstances naturally change, your instructions to the trustee can adapt quickly and seamlessly. Okay, Section 4, privacy, taxes, and reporting. This is where we get into the really robust financial and legal shields that a trust provides against outside scrutiny. One of the absolute most powerful features of a trust is its anonymity shield. Think about it. A traditional will becomes a matter of public record the second it goes through probate. Anybody can just look it up. But a trust, that is a perfectly private agreement strictly between the settlor and the trustee. There is zero requirement to register or submit the trust deed to any public authority. Actually, it gets better. The trust deed can often be drafted without the names of the beneficiaries even appearing on the document itself. That heavily restricts who is legally entitled to information about the trust. Now, we do have to balance this with a reality check. While you have these incredible privacy benefits from the general public, trustees still have very real governmental reporting obligations. You have to ensure compliance with international taxation laws. This means playing by the rules of regulatory regimes like the Common Reporting Standard, or CRS, and the U.S.'s Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. You've probably heard it called FATCA. So it's an amazing private shield from public snooping, absolutely, but it remains fully compliant with international tax authorities.
And hey, speaking of taxes, trusts generally offer some particularly attractive fiscal benefits. Now, yes, it's true that every single country has its own totally unique tax rules, and some are way more aggressive towards trust than others, but a well-structured trust can mitigate the trust fund from really onerous taxes that might otherwise be due. At the very least, trusts often allow for the deferral of these taxes years, even decades into the future. And what does that mean? It means keeping more of your wealth working for your family right now. And finally, our last pillar, Section 5, shielding assets from claims. So how exactly does a trust operate as a financial vault against life's worst-case scenarios? Let's walk through this logic, because intent matters immensely here. Step 1. You absolutely must establish the trust for legitimate purposes. We're talking estate, succession, or the tax planning we just went over. If you set up a trust specifically to illegally dodge existing creditors, yeah, the courts will absolutely overturn that and seize the assets. However, if it's set up legitimately, you move to Step 2, transferring independent ownership of the assets over to the trustees. By doing that by the book, you achieve Step 3, gaining a massive shield of protection against subsequent totally unforeseen events, like a future bankruptcy or even a messy divorce.
This total separation of ownership is what creates a feature called repatriation resistance, because the assets sitting in the trust are owned by the trustees, independently entirely of the settlor or the beneficiaries. It's generally just not possible for a foreign court to enforce repatriation procedures against those trustees. The only real catch here, well, the main caveat, is if the physical assets themselves are sitting directly inside the enforcing jurisdiction. That can make things tricky. But otherwise, this independent ownership structure acts as a nearly impenetrable barrier. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, looking at how trusts provide discretion, how they bypass the absolute trap of probate, how they offer privacy, and how they shield assets from future claims. All of which leads me to leave you with this one provocative thought to end on. Does your current estate plan actually do what you think it does? Because if your wealth is currently relying purely on a traditional will, or if you're missing the protections against mismanagement and future claims that we've outlined today, it might be time to take a much closer look at your strategy. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.